We're often told that all debt is bad. It's probably one of the most emotional and misunderstood topics in all of personal finance. But what if that's not the full story? Today, we're going to explore the other side of debt. We've all heard this, right? It's the go-to advice from financial gurus, and it's shouted from stages and all over our social media feeds. It's simple, it's dramatic, and it's absolutely designed to scare you into taking action. And so these phrases, they become like mantras. They paint debt as this inescapable trap, or even as some kind of moral failing. This fear-based narrative is incredibly powerful, and honestly, for a lot of people, it's the only story they ever hear about borrowing money. But let's pause and ask a question here. If debt is so universally evil, how do we explain the fact that the world's wealthiest individuals and corporations use it as one of their primary tools for growth? Right there, that's the core paradox. The very thing that we are told to avoid at all costs is being used strategically at the highest levels of business and wealth creation. So, what do they know that the common wisdom is leaving out? Well, to really understand this, we first need to look at the psychology behind all that advice. The warnings, they usually come from a good place. They're meant to protect people from financial ruin. The problem is, fear often leads to oversimplification. And that's exactly what happened here. A very specific, very true warning about the dangers of high-interest consumer debt got flattened into this universal, absolute rule. All the nuance was lost, mostly because all debt is evil is a much simpler and, frankly, a much scarier message to spread. So let's try to reframe this. I think this quote illustrates the point perfectly. Debt isn't inherently good or evil. It's just a tool. The outcome depends entirely on who is using it and for what purpose. The key is really understanding how to use the fire without getting burned. And that brings us to the very core of this whole explainer, a strategic framework that separates the useful from the harmful. It all comes down to understanding that there are two fundamentally different types of debt. And this is the difference, laid out side by side. On one side, you've got money essentially going into a hole, debt that consumes your future. On the other side, you have money being planted like a seed, debt that can actually build your future. Let's take a closer look at each one. Okay, so destructive debt. This is what all that fear-based advice is really about. This is your high-interest credit card balance you ran up for a vacation, or a loan for a fancy car that loses value the second you drive it off the lot. It buys you things that go down in value, financed at a high cost. It is, effectively, stealing from your future self. Strategic debt is the complete opposite. This is when you borrow to acquire assets, things that hold their value, or even better, increase in value, with a really clear plan to come out ahead. Think of a well-researched mortgage on a rental property, or a low-interest loan to expand a profitable business. In this case, the debt is an investment. So how does this strategic debt actually work to accelerate wealth? Well, the key concept here is called leverage. It is one of the most powerful forces in all of finance, and debt is the engine that makes it run. Let's walk through a simple example. Let's say you have $100,000 in cash that you want to invest in real estate. Now, instead of just buying a $100,000 property, you use that money as a down payment. You take on some strategic debt, a mortgage of $400,000 to acquire a $500,000 property. Instantly, you now control an asset that's 5 times larger than your initial cash investment. Okay, so let's say that $500,000 asset appreciates by just 5% in 1 year. That's a gain of $25,000. Now here's the crucial part. That $25,000 gain is measured against your initial $100,000 investment. That's a 25% return on your cash, all thanks to the power of leverage. Without that debt, that same 5% appreciation would have only earned you $5,000. See the difference? But, and this is incredibly important to remember, leverage is an amplifier, not a magic wand. It amplifies outcomes in both directions. If that same asset had dropped in value by 5%, your losses would have been just as magnified. This just reinforces the idea that debt is a powerful tool that you have to use with intelligence and with caution. So how can you make sure that you're using this powerful tool correctly? Well, here's a practical framework, a checklist you can use to evaluate any potential debt. It all comes down to asking yourself 4 simple questions. First, is the interest rate low? Because high rates can just eat away any potential gains. Second, is this for an asset? Are you buying something that can grow in value or produce income?
Remember, the goal is for the asset to outperform the cost of the debt. Third, and this one is non-negotiable, can I comfortably afford the payments? If it's going to cause you financial stress, it is not strategic. And finally, does this move genuinely increase my long-term net worth? What I own minus what I owe? If you can confidently answer yes to all 4 of these, you're likely looking at a strategic opportunity.
If you want a simple guiding principle to remember, it's this. Destructive debt closes doors by locking up your future income. Strategic debt should always do the opposite. It should open up new possibilities and create more freedom for you down the line. Ultimately, the goal isn't to live a life of extreme debt-fueled risk or, on the other side, a life of extreme debt-averse fear. True, sustainable wealth is built somewhere in the middle by using a balanced and intelligent approach. It's about understanding the tools you have at your disposal and then using them wisely. So, the ultimate takeaway is this. It's time we replace financial fear with financial intelligence. Understanding when and how to use debt isn't about being reckless. It's about being strategic. And that understanding, that is the real key to building long-term wealth.